Welcome back. We started our learning journey from our sixth session. The first key concept in learning is to keep our mind focused to one sense or focus all senses to one point to make us save and store the acquired information. This we called it as the pratiswara mode of learning or focused mode of learning. Later we also learned that for making this information to be helpful to recall or search it, we need to index it and save it. And this indexing is done during the paryaasa or diffused mode of learning. So we have to stay 25 minutes in focus mode and 5 minutes in diffuse mode to make our learning efficient. After covering these two things in our 6th and 7th session, then in the 8th session we discussed about organizing our knowledge into useful and junk information. And this happens when we are in sleep. We also learned that for the brain to recognize a particular information as important, we have to recall it again and again. Especially recalling a newly learned chapter or concept just before going to sleep cements this knowledge in our memory. We should also take care that we have enough good sleep to be a good learner. Now comes our next stage of learning, which we call as Godha Samskara or brain training. You might have seen the 6 ab bodies of Bollywood stars, and many youths are obsessed in getting their body in right shape. How do they do it? It is purely by the control of how and where the muscles grow in our body. How do they control it? It is through regular workouts and exercises. You cannot build a 6-ab body in just few hours. It needs days and months of hard work and consistency in our workout. Similar to our muscles, even our brain can be trained. We can train our brain to make it knowledgeable and intelligent. The most debated question even today is whether intelligence and IQ is a born gift or can it be achieved by anyone through hard work? Well, the answer is that genetical inheritance and born gift is just a small part of contribution to our IQ or intelligence. And the major contribution to it comes from our hard work to train the brain to become intelligent. So now we are going to discuss about how to make our brain intelligent. How can we increase a child or student IQ level? To understand it, we have to again dive deep into the structure of our brain. We have already learned that our brain is made up of 4 parts: cerebrum, cerebellum, brainstem and amygdala. And all our learning happens in our cerebrum. We already know that we garner information from our 5 senses and send it to our temporary memory called prefrontal cortex. Later, to store it permanently, we need to send it to hippocampus part. And this we need to do it by grabbing the information in pratiswara or focused mode of learning. Now basically, all the cells in our brain can be classified into 2 main types. One we call as neurons, which actually stores the information. The second type of cells is called as the glial cells, and they support all the activities of neurons like supplying blood to them and maintaining the neurons and clearing out the dead cells. In other words, glial cells are the maintenance engineers of our brain. Every information that we grab through our 5 senses are stored in neurons. We also studied its structure. It has nucleus, axon, which is on the top, and through a tail, it is connected to axon terminals at the bottom, which is like tree branches. Now, this neuron also has a branch-like structure, both at the tail end, which we call it as axon terminal, and also on the other side of axon, which is called as dendrites. The search index and location information of every neuron is stored in the myelin sheath, which is created when we are in the paryaasa mode of learning. Now, this information that we have collected through our senses is raw data. It is just the information. It is like the data that we store on our hard disk in a computer. However, this data will be useless if we do not have proper tools to use it. An image file in our computer is a data. But if we want to open it, modify it or work with it, we need a software like Photoshop or image editing software. Similarly, even in our brain, the information stored in our neuron cells is raw data. And our intelligence or IQ lies in the way we are going to make use of it. Now, Godha Samskara or brain training is nothing but trying to build an application in our brain that can open, analyze and work with the data we have stored in our brain. Just like Adobe has built a program called Photoshop to work with images, Blackmagic has built a program called DaVinci Resolve to work with videos. Similarly, now we have to build an application in our brain which will read, analyze and work on this information to provide us the required solutions. Now this process of building a software in our brain to handle all the data we have collected through the senses is in today's neuroscience is called as a program called as neuroplasticity. To understand it better, we can consider these neuron cells with information as small blocks of Lego game set. Now, these Lego game sets are just a heap of blocks when dumped in a place. In Lego language, this block is called as a brick. It is shaped in such a way that on one side you have cylindrical structure and the other end we have the holes to make it get locked into it. It is like a plug and socket system. This way we can connect two Lego bricks together. Similarly, even in our neuron cells, we have two branch-like structures. One at the nucleus side, and this we call it as dendrites, and the other is the axon terminal, which is on the other side of the tail. Just like we connect two Lego bricks using the cylindrical structure and holes, we can connect two neurons to one another by connecting the dendrites of one neuron to the axon terminal of another neuron. Now in case of Lego blocks, they are held by the physical pressure exerted by the pieces. It is like a plug and socket system. But in case of our brain, the dendrites of one neuron will be held by the axon terminal of another neuron through an electromagnetic force. And this force in neuroscience is called as synapse. Now in neuroscience, we have two processes happening in our brain. They are called as neurogenesis and the second process we call it as neuroplasticity. Neurogenesis is a process that occurs in our hippocampus and this process generates new neuron cells in our brain. Neurogenesis is like a Lego toy factory where new Lego blocks are manufactured. Now neuroplasticity on the other hand is the process of connecting two neurons together and holding it to them through an electromagnetic field, and this field we call it as the synapse. Now Godha Samskara or brain training basically deals with mastering these two processes in our brain. How we can generate more neurons through neurogenesis to store information and how we can make that information useful by combining them by the process of neuroplasticity. Here we are seeing a heap of Lego blocks. This is just some heap of waste as we see it now. But when we start to use this block and combine them with our creativity, we can then create useful toys and items. As we can see here, the heap of Lego block is given a meaningful shape and purpose by combining them in various combinations with other Lego blocks to create various objects. Similar to this process, the neuron in our brain cells are just like this heap of Lego blocks. Now to get some meaningful or useful output from it, we have to now connect these blocks together in a proper procedure to create meaningful objects. This creative process of connecting all this information together to create a meaningful information in our brain is what we call as neuroplasticity. And the training we need to do this is what we call as Godha Samskara or brain training. Now let us understand what happens in our brain when we learn. In order to learn anything, whether it is math, foreign language, guitar or how to play basketball, we need to not just create information with neurons, but also should know how to interconnect them and create what we call as neural pathway in our brain. Now let us think about how we play basketball. A good basketball player will precisely know how much force and direction and angle he has to apply to put the ball in the basket, as he already has an established neural pathway in his brain. And this comes from his muscle memory. This muscle memory resides in the brain and not in the muscles. Brain controls everything our muscles do and does it by activating our neurons using the information it has in its neural pathways. These pathways are called as functional pathways. To play basketball, how much of hand needs to be lifted, what force it has to be pushed, what is its angle, all this information related to this basketball are grouped together as a function and placed in a neural pathway. Say as a beginner, you start to learn basketball. Initially when you start, your brain has absolutely no clue about how to throw as there is no neural pathway associated with this action. So first, we need to create it. So now let us understand exactly what is happening in our brain when we are doing this basketball learning. When you are first learning, the neurons in our brain, it is like trees in a dense forest. Ball in your hand is point A and the basket you are seeing is point B. There is no clear pathway between point A and point B. Now as you start to throw the ball and learn, you have to keep on repeating the process till a path is created between these 2 points in your brain. Just like in a forest, if you keep on walking in a particular path for a long time, no grass and trees grows there and it automatically creates a path. Similarly here, repeated practice makes you establish this pathway in your brain. So as we start, since the pathway is still not built, we do not perform well. In order for our brain to build this pathway, we need to keep on throwing the ball to basket. And as we keep on throwing, the pathway is slowly built. This process is what we call as abhyasana or practice. So as you keep on practicing, this pathway slowly widens and creates a more clearer path. Now as the pathway is becoming clearer, now you who previously was able to put 1 ball out of 10 in the basket, now you can put 4 balls out of 10 balls into the basket. And this is possible due to the strong pathway the mind builds by your repeated practice. As the pathway is built, the brain automatically builds an application or program, just like Photoshop or Microsoft Word, which will automatically take your ball and throw it into your basket. Now as you keep on practicing, the pathway which was just a mud road turns into a fully asphalted road, and this increases our reflex and the speed of information flow between A and B. So now you have a success rate of 7 out of 10 and now you can be a team player in a basketball team. As you keep on practicing, this road becomes a multi-lane highway and then an expressway. Once you have built this expressway and a perfect application in our brain, now you are a master who need not think about how to throw, what force I have to give, what angle I have to maintain. All this happens in our brain, and thanks to amygdala, which handles all these calculations for us in the brain. Now throwing the ball to the basket is a subconscious act, and you need not think or put any effort in your brain for these calculations. Now in neuroscience, this is what we call as plasticity, which enables us to create and strengthen new connections in our brain. So brain training is nothing but repeating a set of processes consistently every day till we build a clear pathway in our memory. This is the reason that in our new education policy, we have allotted 25 minutes to pratiswara and 5 minutes to paryaasa. And these two processes build new neuron information, or it helps in neurogenesis. But the last 20 minutes we are dedicating it to a process called abhyasana, where the children has to now connect and build the neural pathways through neuroplasticity. As we discussed in our 4th session, this is where the teacher's role changes from being a teacher to a coach. A coach is not a master in his subject, but he is a master in making students do things consistently. He is a guide to see that you practice without any distractions, and he acts as a measure to see how much progress you are doing in your practice. We will discuss more about this in our 13th session on Atvara Abhyasana and 14th session on Antarika Abhyasana. But as of now, we have to just know that brain training involves 2 processes in our brain to make it efficient day by day. One is the neurogenesis, creation of new neuron information. This we do in our class by the first 25 minutes pratiswara mode of learning and next 5 minutes paryaasa mode learning. Then the second process that needs to be mastered is the neuroplasticity, and this we do it by the last 20 minutes abhyasana mode of learning. So our science says exactly what our ancient Veda says about knowledge. According to Atharva Veda, the brain of a newly born child is a barren land. We have to first make the soil fertile by practicing some ethical procedure called Adarsh. This we will discuss in detail in our next prayer, Nanda prayer. Later, we have to plant the trees here, and this we do it by grabbing knowledge through the process of pratiswara and paryaasa mode of learning. Once we plant the information trees and make it grow, then we need to build pathways in the forest to travel from one information or tree to another faster. And this pathway building process in science is called as neuroplasticity, and in our Veda we call this process as abhyasana. All these concepts of perfect learning system were incorporated thousands of years back. But this knowledge unfortunately got wrapped in many manuscript documents, unable to be reached by us. However, now with a new division in Indian government called Indian Knowledge System, we are now able to explore this beautiful ancient learning tradition. And as we explore, we are now adapting it in our new national education policy. Bringing back the glory of India, which was once the happiest and the most knowledgeable land, is our main motto. So let us keep exploring these excellent learning techniques that our ancestors have prescribed for us. Let us meet in our next session to discuss about Pratikriya Angata.